All right, the last thing we're doing is something called combustion analysis. And again, this is a typical analysis that would be done in a lab to determine the composition of an unknown substance. And in this case, it's an unknown substance that contains carbon, hydrogen, and possibly oxygen. And so just to give you a little background, so you'll kind of know where these values that we're going to use are where they come from, we have a substance, and they put it in like a little chamber here. Okay, we're going to feed some oxygen into that chamber and burn the substance. Okay, the products of that reaction are going to be passed through a water absorber and a CO2 absorber. If you remember from some just basic chemistry, when we burn a hydrocarbon, all right, if I have a compound with carbon and hydrogen in it, and I burn it, and remember in chemistry burning just means we're combining it with oxygen, okay, and the products are going to be H2O and CO2, all right. That also applies if there is oxygen in this initial substance as well. Our products would still only be H2O and CO2. Now, the key thing to remember in our method of solving this is if we look at our unknown substance, all right, here is the carbon, and what do we notice about our products? Well, we notice that all of the carbon from the substance is going to end up in that carbon dioxide. And similarly, all of the hydrogen from that reactant is going to end up in the water. And so if we know how much water was produced, I can go either through a factor label calc or through a percent composition calc. I can find out how much hydrogen was in the original carbon based on how much water was produced. Same thing with the carbon. I can look at how much CO2 was produced and determine from that how much carbon was in the original component. Now, if there was oxygen in the original component, I couldn't do a straightforward calc like that, just because in order for this substance to burn, I'm actually adding oxygen to it. And so the oxygen that's in the water and the carbon dioxide can come from the oxygen that I'm feeding into the apparatus, or it could have been part of the initial compound if the initial compound had oxygen in it. So we'll add a little step to figure out the oxygen. But essentially the thing to remember is we're really only calculating an empirical formula, and when our data is given to us this way, where we have a mass of water and a mass of CO2, that there's just an initial step we have to do to get it into a simple empirical formula calc. All right, so again, we're going to convert the data that we get, which the data we're going to get is going to be grams of water and grams of CO2. Okay, we're going to convert that into grams of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen if we know it's present in the substance. Then we're going to determine the empirical formula the same way we did before. And then if we know the molar mass, we can use the empirical formula with the molar mass to find the molecular formula. So we're just kind of adding a little thing up front with this. So let's look at an example problem. Here I have a compound, trioxane, which has carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And the data, I have two experiments. One where they burned it and got a certain amount of water and carbon dioxide, and then the second experiment they found the molecular mass. So first we're going to look at this data here, and to go from grams of water to grams of hydrogen, you can do it one of two ways, and either way is perfectly fine. In general, I'll just show you here, I have 10.477 grams of water. And I can use just regular factor label. Molar mass of water is 18.015 grams to 1 mole of water. And then for every 1 mole of water, I get 2 moles of hydrogen. And for 1 mole of hydrogen, I get 1.008 grams of hydrogen. So I can work it out that way. 10.477 divided by 18.015 times 2 times 1.008. And so that gives me 1.172 grams of hydrogen. Or the other way I could do it is I can use the percent composition of water. So I know that I have that in water I have 2 hydrogens for every whole water. And if you calculate the percent composition, that comes out to be approximately 11.2% hydrogen in water. So the other way that I could calculate this is I could do that if I have 11.2 grams of hydrogen in 100 grams of water, then I have X grams of hydrogen in 10.477 grams of water. Okay, now that, so we have that times 477. So that gives us the same exact answer, 1.172 grams of hydrogen. So you can use the percent hydrogen in water, or you can use the factor label method, either way, to get from grams of water to grams of hydrogen. And it's similar for CO2. In CO2, let's see, I have 1 carbon. So the percent, there's about 27.3% carbon in CO2. And so if I do similarly that times my, or the other way, I can use that percent, 0.273 times my grams of CO2, 25.612 grams of CO2, and that's going to give me 6.992 grams of carbon. All right. So either way, or I could have done just a factor label to get that same answer. Whichever way you want to do it is fine. The essential thing is you want to get down to where you have, there's my grams of hydrogen, here's my grams of carbon. Now, this also said I have oxygen in it. The only way to find the oxygen is, I know I had 0.471 grams of the total of my unknown substance. Okay, minus the 1.172 grams of hydrogen minus the 6.992 grams of carbon. The remainder is the oxygen. So minus 1.172, 6.992, and so that gives me 9.307 grams of oxygen. All right, now I have my 3 components there, and I'm going to copy these down so that I can move to a clean slide here and work the rest of this problem. So then this is the only new part, because from this point on it's going to be a regular empirical formula calculation. So let's transfer these numbers.